up, everyone? Welcome to Political Insider. I'm Brett Smith, your humble host. Joining me today is president of Right Turn Strategies and frequent guest on Kennedy Nation on FBN and Waters World on FNC, Chris Barron. Welcome back.
Glad to be back.
All right. Let's talk your new op-ed. I'm going to bring it up. Here we go. This is titled "The Media Hopes You Didn't Watch Biden's Speech." I did watch Biden's speech. That's all I'm going to say about it. I'm just going to let you respond because I'm still kind of speechless. It was insane.
Well, I mean, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, how on earth is anybody going to spin this speech as something good? I mean, Biden seemed confused. He seemed lost. Like his moments where he was trying to show emotion were so awkward and cringeworthy. I mean, the whole thing felt like it was just off. And I'm like, this is a disaster. That anybody watching this has to understand this is a nightmare. How will the media even be able to spin this? And sure as hell they did. I mean, that's what's truly amazing to me. It's not that Biden gave a terrible speech. Biden gives terrible speeches. He's a confused old man. What's amazing to me is the media can actually, with a straight face, try to tell us that it was somehow poetry. It was magic. It was amazing. It was the empathizer in chief. It was just what we needed in that moment.
Right. Let's read some of these reviews. We got two that are just absolutely off the wall. They're almost like a borderline satire. So first up, we have Chris Saliza, CNN, Communist News Network. The return of empathy. Biden made a single gesture in the speech that demonstrated that the empathy he operates with vis-a-vis the lives lost to this pandemic. He pulled a card out of his jacket pocket, which he says he keeps with him wherever he goes, and read off the exact up-to-date number of Americans who have died from the coronavirus. That number is more than 527,000. Yes, of course, Biden did that for dramatic effect, but it worked, and it drove home the idea that this is a leader who keeps those who have died from the pandemic close to his heart, literally. It also provided a not-so-subtle contrast with Trump's overt politicization of the virus and those who succumbed to it. What's your response to that?
It was terrible shit. Literally, Chris Saliza says yeah, he did it for dramatic effect, but it worked. No, it didn't.
I know. It's like, what world does this guy live in?
I mean,
pretty bad.
It's like I don't even know how to respond to again. The only explanation here is they're banking on nobody having watched it. And people will just be getting ready in the morning to send their kids off to school or go to work, and they're going to hear the coverage of it, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's so great to have Joe Biden who cares about people so much, unlike that mean old Trump." Because if you watched it, you're like, "Oh crap, man! How do we go back to mean old Trump?" Because this guy is a nightmare. It's not. He's
Trump
not
and his mean old tweets.
The loss close to his heart. He has to write down how many people died of COVID because he's gonna forget.
Yeah. It was pretty sad, dude. So we've also got Washington Compost's own Jen Rubin, everyone's favorite. The speech itself was sober in retrospect and optimistic in forecast. Biden recalled our collective suffering and the heroic efforts of scientists and healthcare professionals. He poetically announced, "Finding light in the darkness is a very American thing to do. In fact, it might be the most American thing we do." As he is wont to do, who talks like that, Biden commiserated with the loss of life and economic turmoil, the educational interruption, and the missed opportunities from families. Ironically, he said, "We found unity in suffering. While it was different for everyone, we all lost something."
Jen Rubin is reviewing the speech that she would have liked to have seen because nothing that she explained happened. There was no poetry in Biden's performance. I mean, this is, they like to talk about the gaslighting during the Trump era. This is gaslighting 101. I promise you, like Jen Rubin wrote this column before Biden even spoke, and then just plugged in some things that Biden like specifically said, because that's not a column that you write after watching that nightmare delivery again. No, like you read the words, fine. Take the words that Biden read and just read them back yourself. Be like, well, that could be a good speech. Like maybe it was all right. And then you watch the delivery.
Yeah.
Like the delivery here was awful. It was terrible. He mumbled. He was stumbling around. Like he looked lost. Like for a guy who spent his entire life in Washington in front of cameras, it looked like, we could wander out on stage and didn't know what the hell to do. Like, look at all these cameras. What do I do now? Like, I mean,
yeah, dude, the decline of this guy, even from the primaries and the debates, it's pretty noticeable at this point.
It really is. And again, I mean, I understand that the DNC and the Biden campaign is going to spin this, but the media should be concerned. The media should really be concerned about the status of the leader of the free world. Like this was not an inspiring speech given by a trusted commander in chief. This was a hot freaking mess. This is a mess, and anybody who watched it who isn't a shill for Biden and the Democratic Party would tell you that was a mess. That's just absolute mess. Like again, I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be surprised because during the campaign, Biden was he is. In modern times, no candidate has been asked less tough questions than Joe Biden. The contrast to the media's treatment of Hillary Clinton, who they fawned all over, she actually had to answer some tough questions during her presidential run. But they saw that, like in 2016, making her answer tough questions actually helped Trump. So they did not do that at all in 2020. Like Biden didn't have to answer a single tough question. His like toughest moments came in the primary, at the hands of his now vice president, Kamala Harris. I mean, those are the toughest like blows that Joe Biden ever took during the campaign. So I shouldn't be surprised at this coverage, but this is not asking the tough questions. This is watching something and just pretending that what you saw is something different. This is Orwellian in its very nature. I don't get it.
Scott Adams likes to talk about two movies and cognitive dissonance. That's what I kept thinking of when I was watching this. Was there's two movies here, and we all see that with Jen. We see that with Chris. These people saw something completely different, and they're just shills.
But there's no way to
describe it.
They didn't see something different. They saw the exact same things that you and I saw. They saw the same things that every American who tuned in, hoping to be reassured. I'll be honest with you. I tuned in because I wanted to be a little reassured about the fact that Joe Biden is president of the country. Yeah, fine. I can disagree with Joe Biden on policy, but I wanted to see like the steady hand that, all right, I don't like him. Fine. Things are going to be okay. I walked away from that thinking, holy crap, we're in trouble. We are in trouble. He's not okay. This isn't okay. And they did too. Jen Rubin and Chris Liza didn't walk away from this thinking that Joe Biden delivered an Abraham Lincoln-like oratory. They know it was a disaster, which is why they actually kind of had to like really amp up the praise for it, was to cover for the fact that it was clearly a nightmare.
Do you think they're ashamed about what they do at all? Do you think there's any shame left in the press?
No, they just cash those checks. None whatsoever. There's no shame left. There's no shame. I mean, if there were, I mean, look, Jen Rubin's written the same column for 4 years. She's memory holed every position that she ever held for the previous 20 years and pretends like they never even happened. I mean, the fact that
those are the worst offenders. So who else out there do you think is basically just carrying on water for the Biden administration?
I mean, every single person who shows up on CNN. I mean, literally, like have you? And unfortunately, this stuff trickles down to like local news. Like I was watching local news coverage after the morning after, and was hoping there'd be some like different coverage, kind of like it doesn't have to be like we're scared or Biden's a confused old man, but at least some like recognition that this like wasn't Biden in his best, you know? And instead, it was like, no, it was just trickle down from the big media down to local media, all carrying the same water for Democrats. I mean, look, this is the entire legacy media from top to bottom is busted. It's completely and totally busted. And I don't know, other than conservatives and people who care about truth supporting independent media, I don't know what the way forward is for our own media.
Let's get back to Biden's speech for a minute. You know, and just on the merits, did he say anything useful to any of us as American citizens? I mean, was there anything in there that you could extrapolate that, you know, made you feel like he was in charge and at least, they're taking care of business?
No, it's like the one thing that you think that like maybe this is a little hopeful. Because again, by the way, they like to talk about how Trump's speech was so dark. Like this Biden speech was as dark as it gets. Like there was like the one thing that there was like hopeful is that like we might let you have small family gatherings by July 4th. Right. It's like you hear it and you're like, oh, we might get small gatherings, yay. And then you're like, wait, what do you mean you're going to let me have small family gatherings? It's like, oh, I have a small family gathering where the hell I want to. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like even the thing that was supposed to be hopeful is so deeply like disturbed in its ideological roots. The idea that they thought that the message that would sell would be that we may let you gather in small groups by the 4th of July. I'm just like, holy cow. Like this is how far we have come around the bend in this country, that the idea, imagine in 2019, in March of 2019, Trump going up and giving a speech saying we may let you gather in small groups by July 4th. People would lose their mind. What fascism did I wake up to? Like what kind of third world dictatorship have I woken up to? And that's now it's like, oh no, that's the actual optimistic message. The optimistic message is that you live in a third world banana republic and that your dictator may be benevolent enough to allow you to gather in small groups by the 4th of July.
It's pretty scary. And then you take into consideration that Washington D.C. looks like East Berlin under the Iron Curtain, with razor wire and a giant fence out, basically a wall going, that encapsulates the whole thing. Yeah, man, this is not the country I was born into in 1976. And I just kind of look around and I just ask myself, where do I find that world? And unfortunately, you can't even find it really in the reddest areas of Texas. I guess you could probably find some semblance of it maybe in Florida, but it's few and far between these days. And it's funny, Florida's numbers, they're no worse than like the national averages. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, was the lockdowns even necessary? Were the masks even necessary? Was any of this necessary if we're going to end up with basically the same numbers from the standpoint of areas or cities that are masked, others that are not?
And that's the dirty little secret, Brad. There's going to be studies, they'll come out 5-10 years from now. That no way academia lets this stuff happen anywhere close enough to make Democrats actually pay the political price for it. But at some point, there's going to be this like, oh, wow, turns out that there was really nothing we could do. That COVID was going to make its way through our population, and that the outcomes really didn't like there is no connection between the states that took the most draconian hardcore lockdown regulations and mandates and those that didn't. And that should scare us. That this moment when it's all over is now the moment where people are starting to say like, wow, it seems like there's no difference. I mean, the fact is that's not something new. This is not a new revelation. It's new that anyone in the media is even admitting it. I saw there was like an LA Times story comparing California and Florida and essentially saying like, hey, it's actually been worse in California, and comparing New York and Florida and saying like, oh, maybe we should revisit DeSantis's approach here. Well, this isn't new. We've known this all along. You know, like we should have revisited this. Look, I actually said I was willing to give people forgiveness for their reactions that they made in March and April of 2020 because people didn't know what was going on.
Sure.
They didn't know what was happening. And it was something we had never faced before. By the summer of 2020, we knew what worked and what didn't work. And what we knew was that these lockdowns didn't help. And that the rates simply did, the math didn't add up. It wasn't working, but no one would admit it. No one would say this isn't working.
Yeah, they have so much invested in being right, and frankly, I wouldn't have a problem if a governor or somebody came out, even somebody from the CDC, and said, "Hey, look, we didn't know. Yeah, we didn't know what we didn't know in the beginning this time last year, but now we know.
Yeah, we do,
and we want to correct. You know, and that's what doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, that's what makes me so mad about Fauci. You know, I mean, look, the truth is Fauci's being treated like a saint, and he's gotten everything wrong from the very beginning, you know? And like, I would just like a little humility, just a little like recognition that you want to know what we were dealing with something completely unknown. We didn't, in our lifetimes, we never dealt with anything like this. We did the best we could early on. We thought these measures would help, but they didn't, you know, the empirical evidence is now clear. If like, let's follow the science. And they've been talking about following the science. They've never followed the science. Let's follow the science. The science actually shows a year into this that the outcomes were no difference between places like Florida that had no mask regulations, no lockdowns, and places like New York and California that did. Okay, you were wrong. You were wrong. You should have followed the science. You should have listened to the experts. You should have looked at the empirical data and followed it, and they didn't. And going forward, we should never allow this to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but Anthony Fauci has never treated one patient in his life. The guy came out of medical school and became a government bureaucrat. That's what he is. He's a lifelong, worthless government bureaucrat who has been working on the AIDS vaccine since the 80s, and that's going really well.
Legitimately, look, I didn't have any beef with Fauci at the beginning of this, and
neither did I.
I'm willing to. Like, hey, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to do what they say. But then it was pretty clear that everything that we were doing didn't seem to be having an impact. The numbers were getting worse, cases were going up, deaths were going up. I was like, we're all doing this stuff. So why are we doing this stuff if it's not actually helping? And that it was last summer was really the time for the course correction. I'm willing to have grace, give people grace towards the spring. Nobody knew what was happening. I'm willing to understand. I know there are people who were like, nah, I won't wear a mask. I won't lock down. I won't do it. Beginning, I was like, I'm going to be the good little guy here. I'm going to do what they're telling me to do because I don't want people to needlessly die. But by the summer of last year, it was clear that it didn't matter how many times I wore a mask. It didn't matter how much time I spent at home. It didn't matter how many times I avoided seeing my family, avoided seeing friends. None of that stuff was helping. And it wasn't a guess. It wasn't like Chris, the amateur sleuth, was poking. We had empirical data. We had states that did it one way, states that did it another way, and we saw there's essentially no difference. If anything, the states that had the most hardcore lockdowns had worse. They had a worse time dealing with it. And by the way, that's just talking about the COVID side. That's not even talking about the mental health, well-being, jobs, economy. Florida is free America right now.
I know.
And it's not just that they got it right about look, if you want to wear a mask, if the private industry wants to make you wear a mask, that's fine. If not, that's fine too, because it doesn't seem to do any different, make a difference here. But they didn't destroy their economy in the process. They didn't needlessly destroy people's lives and families. And it's just, to me, it's a mystery how that while we're starting to see some of this conversation about maybe there wasn't, a big difference. Why didn't we have this conversation in June? Why last year didn't we have governors saying it's not working? Yeah, it's just not working.
Yeah, we were going crazy over spring breakers this time last year. There was a bunch of spring breakers down in Florida who basically were just partying it up. and going crazy and just doing their thing like they do every year. And a lot of people were upset over it. I was kind of like, I mean, they're going to do what they do. That's young people. But at the same time, I thought to myself, okay, young people at least have they have youthful resilience, right? And even if you work out and you're young, you're going to probably have a boosted immune system. But it's funny, all those people that people were freaking out about last year turned out to be right. And it's like they went out and had a good time and everybody flipped out about it. And now it's kind of like they're all going to go back and have a good time again. I mean, spring break is, starting this week down in Florida. So it should be a party.
Yeah. And by the way, I can tell you from my own personal experience, like the first couple months of quarantine, we were like, we locked down. Like we weren't seeing our friends who live up on the mountain with us. That ended in May. We were like, no. Like, I mean, this is ridiculous, and it's not helping. The numbers aren't trending in the right direction, and everybody's been doing it. So why should we continue to do this?
Yeah.
Like again, I respect if Walmart wants me to wear a mask okay, then I'm gonna wear a mask because that's a private employer. I'll respect what you want. The gas station,
or go shop somewhere else where you don't.
The gas station at the bottom of bottom of my mountain. They don't enforce the mask mandate. So I don't wear one when I'm in there. And by the way, like that, frankly, that was the common sense approach that was pretty clear in the beginning of last summer. And it's what should have been how we operated from then until now. But there was simply way too much political advantage for Democrats in continuing the pandemic porn.
Yeah.
And so that's sadly, we lost a year of our lives for no reason.
Yeah, it's sad, man. And also I want to bring up this 527,000 death total. I really lost a lot of faith in that number when they gave doctors the discretion to classify what is and what isn't a COVID death, rather than use a test to see if that person died of COVID.
But basically, if you died and you happen to be COVID positive at the time, you were coded as dying from COVID.
Well, and the other wrinkle in this is that so they gave doctors the discretion to basically classify deaths, COVID or not, without using a test. And then you also throw in the fact that you had hospitals that were 70% vacant. They were unable to do elective surgeries, which is their bread and butter. And then you throw in this unending reimbursement from everything for COVID deaths.
Well,
is there not an incentive here for doctors to mark everything as COVID? Even motorcycle guy dies in a crash from crashing his motorcycle guy, but he died of COVID.
Right. No, of course there was. Of course there was. And like, I mean, the whole thing was frustrating from the very beginning. And look, there's a move afoot in some states to actually restrict the power of governors from being able to impose these type of regulations. Again, I know in Pennsylvania, there is going to be a constitutional amendment on the ballot in the primary in May that would drastically restrict the governor's abilities to issue regulations without the consent of the legislature during these emergencies. And by the way, we should be doing that all across the country. All across the country, we should be reeling in the powers of these governors. Look, these decisions should never be the whim of one man or one woman. Like if there's a temporary emergency, again, like I said, the spring, I'm fine. They should have had to go before their state legislatures and make their cases about why these regulations were going to remain in place beyond then. And they didn't. And so as a result, we were screwed. If you happen to live in Florida and you had a good governor, things weren't so bad. If you lived in New York or Pennsylvania or Michigan, you had a terrible governor, then you were screwed. And that should never be the case. It should not be left up to the whim of one man or one woman. That's simply too much power in the hands of one individual.
Yeah, I'm hoping we do something here in Arizona. However, the Doug Ducey's intestinal fortitude remains trapped inside Cindy McCain's purse. So I don't expect anything. But I would love to see legislatures. If you're in a red state and your legislature is not enacting laws to at least police the power of governors when it comes to extenuating circumstances like pandemics, scamdemics, whatever you want to call this, then your legislature is not doing what it needs to be doing. Seriously.
By the way, Republicans should be putting ballot initiatives on in every state in November of 2022, like asking,
Yes.
should we restrict the powers of governors? Should we put some guardrails on this? And I can tell you right now, those are the kinds of things that will pass with 70% of the voters, especially once we have a little bit of retrospect on this pandemic. And people are starting to say, wait a second, did I really just spend a year of my life and gave it away for nothing? Did it really never make a difference? Like that is really going to be something I think that will motivate voters in 2022. And it'll be Republicans who have been on the right side of this issue from the very beginning. It'll be Democrats who are left trying to defend, the legacy of all these regulations that never saved a single life and instead ruined lives and ruined economies and destroyed families. So I hope Republicans do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's wealth, that's time, that's you can never get back, whether it's your business or whether you're like me, who I lost my grandma. I wasn't able to go and see her. We couldn't have a funeral for her because she's not a Supreme Court justice, but everybody lost something, during this whole thing. And I'm just hoping, like you said, after there's enough time, there's some retrospective, and people will act accordingly. And man, that's the thing is all of these governors doing all this by executive fiat without the legislature, that grinds me more than anything throughout this whole thing, because there's no consent from the people.
Yep. And it should grind you, and we should never let it happen again. We shouldn't have let it happen this time, and we should never let it happen again.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you go because it sounds like you're busy. You got to get back to work.
I know, my iMessages. It's the bandlines.
I know. That's probably Lisa. Anyway, sadly, we're out of time. I want to thank Chris for joining me. Chris, give everyone your social media coordinates so they know where to find you.
All right, follow me on Twitter at Chris R. Barron.
Awesome. Everyone, make sure and check out thepoliticalinsider.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Don't let big tech dictate the news to you. Also, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please like and share this video far and wide. Subscribe to the Political Insider channel on Rumble and YouTube so you never miss any of our videos like this one. Until next time, everyone keep the faith and stay frosty.